ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. ಈ ದಿನದ ಸೈನ್ಸ್ ಸಂಜೆಗೆ ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ಸ್ವಾಗತ. ಕಲಾಸೃಜಿ ಕುತೂಹಲಿ ಕನ್ನಡ and the academic trust have jointly organized Science Sanje at Suruchi Rangamane. Dr. Jahnavi, Director, Science Gallery, Bengaluru, will deliver a talk in English on the topic Experiments in Public Engagement. Dr. Jahnavi is a filmmaker and historian of science and technology, formerly at King's College of London. She is now the founding director of Science Gallery, Bengaluru, and visiting professor at the National Institute of Advanced Studies. She has been a fellow at the Wissenschaft College Zoo in Berlin between 2013-14, following which she was on secondment to the Science Museum, London, as external curator. Jahnavi is author of Atomic State, Big Science in 12th Century India, 2013, and has recently co-edited Science of Giants, China and India in the 20th century. She is on the editorial board for the British Journal for the History of Science and Technology. She is the director and producer of the documentary film Cyclotron. Dr. Jahnavi Phalkey is a winner of Infosys Foundation Prize. Now she will give the talk for 45 minutes and we will hear it after 15 minutes. A question and answer will be there. Please cooperate. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, for inviting me here. I have to apologize that I don't speak Kannada, although I've lived in Bangalore for little over 6 years. I just have not had the time. Trying to set up the institution has taken most of my time. We did try during the pandemic, my team and I, to learn online, and then I was the worst student in the class because I had no time for homework. So I'm hoping I will change that in the coming years. But I say this not to apologize as much as to assert that I do believe that we need good quality content in Indian languages. We need engagement and public life in Indian languages. My father used to teach Hindi literature all his life. My mother tongue is Marathi. And so Indian languages have been a very, very important part of my upbringing. It's just that I'm in the wrong place with the wrong language right now. So what I will do today is share with you shall I say block? Hello? Okay, so what I will do today is share with you one experiment in public engagement with some ideas around it and what I think needs to be done or what might be valuable as we go forward in public engagement around research. Now, the first thing that I want to share with you is that my own background, as you already mentioned, is in history of science and technology. And that is the perspective I bring to this particular experiment in public engagement. I think what studying history of science and technology allowed me to do is to understand what it means to look at the process of of how knowledge is produced. In a sentence, I think what we often say is that history of science allows you an insight into processes of knowledge production. And I have now, after 6.5 years of trying to create this institution, which you have visited, and I'm hoping most of you will visit at some point. What I understand is that I think I have taken that perspective and that framework also to build this institution, where what I'm trying to do, I think, in this experiment or in this institution, is to allow the visitor to have an insight into how knowledge is produced. Because that insight is very important, given the context in which we are. We often focus on the output of knowledge, just like we focus on the outcomes of other people's successes. So he's become the CEO of Google, so I also have to look at that instead of saying what is it that he pursued in order for that to become possible, right? Like, so I think so. Similar things. Our education also, the way we conduct our education, on broadly, is one where the outcomes of knowledge are very, very important. In school lab work, for example, or even university lab work, the experiments that we carry out, the outcomes are known in a sense, and if you fail to reach that outcome, somehow you have failed to understand the problem. Whereas if you actually ask even a very, very well established scientist to replicate their experiment or someone else to replicate their experiment, in fact, what we have in science today is a replication crisis. So there are concerns around how we teach knowledge or how we take knowledge to the youngster of all ages. And my own experience before as well as now is one of looking at young adults, so 15 and above, and more honestly 18 and above actually. So I will speak to what is the framework we are taking for Science Gallery Bangalore and what purchase that might have. I'll try to speak for less than 40 minutes. Let's see how that goes, or around 40 minutes, so that there's more time for question and answer. Because I think that is when more meaningful exchange happens. Because there's no point in me just sort of dumping everything that I think I know or do in front of you and then kind of go away. At the exchange, I think will be more meaningful for myself as well. I also speak here with some amount of, I'm trying to speak here with some degree of self-awareness. That we are creating this institution in Bangalore. My learning also has been in metropolises in India and elsewhere. I have one or two experience of teaching in what one might, not beyond the metro, so to speak. So I taught once at Central University in Jharkhand. And there were two realizations that experience taught me. One was that very much after the first hour, so I was teaching there for about a week. After the first hour, I realized if I didn't switch to Hindi, the students would probably not appreciate what was happening. They could still deal with mathematics and science subjects in English because they largely, again, same thing, outcomes, right? Like equations and principles and things like that. But when you're teaching something or when you're bringing knowledge in history of science or when you're bringing knowledge about science other than science itself, it's language that is the tool to bring that knowledge, right? And the minute it becomes language, then it's a problem because then you need much more familiarity with the language and its twists and turns. So that was my first sort of humbling moment. But the other thing that I learned, and that is why I say that I speak with some degree of self-awareness today, is that the students in my class, my curriculum was so urban-centric. The insights that I thought were insights were not insights for the students who came from around the area, right? From Ranchi, from Dhanbad, from Patna, here and there. They understood what one would call the big science, big tech story of India since independence in a manner. So the insights that I was offering were actually common knowledge for them. And so an urban syllabus in many ways, or an urban curriculum, or an urban perspective and framework, or a metropolitan framework, often actually it seems quite banal when you take it elsewhere. So that is the reason why I say I speak with some amount of seek your indulgence to the extent that I have not presented this anywhere other than in metropolises until now. So let's start a little bit about the gallery. So we are part of an international network of galleries. The project started out in Trinity College, Dublin. We are now 6 of us across the world. The working principle is as follows. The five of them. So I'll be speaking about Bangalore towards the end of this 1 minute. The principle is to bring scientists and artists together, mainly natural scientists and artists together, to create public engagement, to create installations, engagement events, and things like that in an exhibition gallery. So, in sum, our 5 galleries in Monterrey, Mexico, in Atlanta, at Emory University, King's College London, University of Melbourne, they are basically exhibition galleries where artists and scholars or artists and scientists create public engagement to take research into the public domain. Now, so they are owned by universities, they are run like university departments. Now, the Bangalore is an outlier. We are the only independent gallery in the network. And why that is the case, I will come to in a second. It is also because of the way we run our educational system. And I'll speak to that in a second. So the way we are structured, and this is important, I think, for some of you, because you are running projects at different scales for public engagement across the state. Our founding partner is the government of Karnataka, and our lead academic partner is the Indian Institute of Science, and we work very closely with National Center for Biological Sciences, and also with Shrishti, although Shrishti, since it moved into Manipal, that's a little bit right now on the cloud, but these are our sort of partners. So, what I'm going to speak for in the next few minutes is the rationale behind setting up Science Gallery the way we have. So my model was, or the model I was expected to in a way follow and create was the exhibition gallery model, which I felt was very, very inadequate for the Indian context. In fact, I think it's inadequate for any context, but the Indian context, I think it's particularly impoverished because even at its best functioning, if you bring artists and scholars together, and we have globally sort of, a global open call, we bring artists and scholars from across the world to showcase research in an engaging manner in an exhibition gallery, and then leave it at that, where our people, if they want to do something like that, have no avenue or option at all. Because which Indian science university is going to allow anybody to walk into their labs and do anything there? NCBS has done it to some extent, IISc occasionally does it to some extent, but there is no funding, there is no avenue. Someone who has the privilege might be able to do it. Systemically or structurally, there is no room to do that. So I felt like there had to be a revision of the model, and also the model started out in Dublin 10 years before we started here. So now almost 15 years ago. I also felt that the model that worked in a mid-sized, or rather for India, a small-sized town in Europe with no science museum of its own, is unlikely to easily replicate its success in a city of over 11 million people, in a state of over, state the size of France or UK. Canada is the size of about UK or France. So what should we do? So I set out, and in hindsight now I see that I in many ways, my thinking was geared towards what one might say solving 3 kinds of questions, or solving 3 concerns or problems. Now these are this is the manner in which my thinking has congealed over the last 6 years. So this is an image many of you will recognize from a natural history museum, the Natural History Museum in London. This is an image from the Indian Museum in Calcutta. Now why do I posit this? Because so many of you in the audience will already be aware, because you are a very already engaged and interested audience, that the first public spaces for knowledge were cabinets of curiosities, which largely belonged in Europe to aristocrats and people who sponsored explorers who, in the age of colonialism about 400 or 500 years ago, traveled across the world, collected rocks and flora and fauna and herbaria and range of things, right? Like they came back with curiosities, including unfortunately remains of dead people, and on which invites controversy today. But these were collections from across the world, which then from cabinets of curiosities became museums, where the public was allowed to come and see these things. From science museums, which were historical collections based, of which there are very few in India, we moved from there to science centers, where history is in a way removed from that knowledge, and principles are abstracted as if science doesn't have a history or a context in which it is done or produced or understood. And it is about, here's a copper plate, put your hand on it, or here's a button, press, So came science centers. And in fact, in India in a single country has the largest network of science centers in the world. So this has been the journey, and I think we are at the cusp of a new kind of institution that is required, and my thinking for Science Gallery joins that sort of larger concern of thinking of what kind of new space, new public space for knowledge we might create, which is relevant for today. Now, what is characteristic of a collection-based historical museum is that the object of scientific inquiry or the object of study, the person who's studying it and the public who's viewing it are in the same space. So the public knows who is studying and what is being studied. They have some insight into it, right? Now that has been lost because museums, I mean, even some, so natural history museums still continue to be research spaces, but most historical collections based museums are no longer research spaces in the same way. You might study museology there, you might study how to display things there, but you don't any longer study science itself there. You no longer produce knowledge in a museum. You have a place where there's James Watt. So just to take the example of the Science Museum in London, which I know best, you have James Watt's engine, you have Stephen Hawking's working room. So it is interesting. This is not to take away from the interest factor or the inspiration factor or the charisma of the object itself. But what I'm trying to say is that this is no longer the place of study. So by looking at Stephen Hawking's study, and if we were to ever have, a place where there was C.V. Raman study or Homi Bhabha study or whatever, by looking at that, you don't necessarily know what is being studied and who's studying it at this moment, right? So the distance between public and knowledge making has been created after we moved away from historical natural history collections to laboratories, which became siloed in disciplines, but also research came to take place behind walls in institutions that were no longer accessible to the public. So not only do you not have access as a taxpayer to a tax funded institution in order to know what's going on there, but you actually don't even know much of what is going on there unless you're registered as a faculty or a student there yourself. So that distance, I think, needs to be bridged. So the question I ask myself is as follows: is there value in trying to rebuild that relationship between what is studied and the public? What is studied, who is studying it, and the public? And if there is value in rebuilding that relationship, how should we do it today? So that is one question to which I'm trying to answer by creating the institutional design for the gallery. Now, second, experiments in the public. What do I mean by that? This is a picture of Michael Faraday at the Royal Institution. And this is a picture of Sir C.V. Raman, who, to begin with, did not want to have women in his laboratories, which is why I particularly like this picture, because he's surrounded by a sea of young women. He did relent, he did eventually allow young women into his lab. But the reason why I have this picture here is that to a significant extent, I think we have forgotten that he remains this country's only science Nobel laureate, who was born here, he studied here, he worked here. We have had many successes of people who left India and then, were awarded the prize, including his nephew. But he remains today the only such person. Now, some of you in this room, again, because you are an interested crowd, you will know, but most people do not know that for the first 10 years of his life, or first 10 years of his professional life, he was with the Indian Audits and Accounts Services. So he was a bureaucrat, he was an accountant. And he, for a small bench fee, he would do research, initially in acoustics and only later in optics after his first journey to England, at this laboratory. And there were many others like him, like Mahendra Sarkar and others, who were during the day a lawyer, in the evening a mathematician, during the day something else, in the evening a logician, during the day teach philosophy, in the evening teach history. So it was it was what I would like to call, like Michael Faraday's Royal Institution, there were other institutions of this kind, and so was the Indian Association for Cultivation of Science. It was a similar institution where a person with a passion for an idea that they wanted to research could actually do so irrespective of what their professional life was. Today that is no longer possible because we don't have institutions like this. Even the ISCS has become a sort of, completely molded into the regular form of an institution with degree granting and this and that and all process and, doors locked to everybody else kind of format. And I'm not trying to single out that institution. Every institution is the same. So the question that I have, and of course the nature of scientific inquiry has changed. I mean, this is at the turn of the last century, right? So it's more of tabletop experiments, experimental systems of the kind that we've seen since the Second World War, with large equipment, expensive equipment. All of that was not there. So it's not easy to today say that we'll build a public space where something like this happens, because how will you even equip it? Plus, research is in silos. So how will you even, what is the lab you're even trying to build? So the question then is a more a circumscribed one, which is there value in creating in the public domain a space where someone can pursue an idea to the point where then it can be taken where it belongs? So can we mentor or can we create a space where someone has basic research facilities, mentorship, and collegiality, where then they work on an idea which then they can take to a university lab, to an industrial lab, or somewhere else. So and the question is of course rhetorical. I do believe there is value for a space of that kind and for freedom and encouragement of passion of that kind. And so that is the second question or problem that I want us to solve at Science Gallery Bangalore. The third, and this, for example, what I call cultural conversation view. This is a place for cultural conversation itself, and you have a range of activities happening here, but also civic responsibility. And I'd like to share with you just briefly, where this sense of or where this idea, even in many ways, can be traced back to. Because in the 1920s, at a place like Stanford University, they had a course for their students called Problems of Citizenship. So an engineering school is aware of the fact that even today their civics initiative continues. So the reason why, there are two reasons why this picture doesn't occupy the full slide. One is, of course, I didn't find an image that could stretch itself to, the entire screen. But the other reason is also because I think it's wonderful. It allows me to tell you that, this institution is an incomplete institution. This is an older image of the Indian Institute of Science. When they started out, when J.N. Tata and Barjar Pacha started out to create this institution, and a number of factors came together, which is the Maharaja of Mysore, the Tatas, and the British residents as well. The idea was to replicate the Johns Hopkins University with a medical college, law, school of law, humanities and social sciences, engineering, natural sciences, so on and so forth. That is what a university is. In India, we have, I feel like I'm doing some drama, major dramaturgy, but I can do drama also, no problem. So which brings me to the question of, not to the question, the observation that I made at the start as to why Science Gallery is the outlier in our network and not on a university campus. Because arguably, and this is not 100% true, but it's about 95% true, we don't have universities. Right? We don't have, what we have are institutions of higher learning. Most of our institutions, we send, even when we have universities, they are on the old British model where there are colleges, which are distributed. If you go to a King's College or a Johns Hopkins, and this is not to say that those are better models or worse models, but what I'm trying to say is, I'll come to what I'm trying to say. So Indian Institute of Science was eventually established primarily as an engineering and some natural sciences school between 1909 and 1911. What we do is between the ages of 15 and 17, we herd our young students into groups. Engineers will study with engineers, architects will study with architects, arts students will study with arts, lawyers will study with lawyers, urban planners with urban planners, so on and so forth. You get the drift, right? So effectively, what we are doing is, we are taking away the ability of our young to converse or be challenged by anybody who is not from their own faculty of learning. And that is one of the reasons why they couldn't place the gallery on a single university campus. Because where would you find that kind of collaboration? The collaboration between engineering and sciences is by now it's hardly interdisciplinary, right? Like by now it's actually a purposeful kind of coming together. Useful again, not to undermine any of the rigor or the strengths of those coming together. of cross-disciplinary work. But we don't have many such campuses in the country. Even if you look at, say, Jawaharlal Nehru University or Hyderabad Central University or others, on one single campus in a dorm, having a historian and a physicist as roommates, for example, in the first year, is something that is very, very rare. Very few places where you will find that. And that, so that was among the first reasons that they couldn't place this gallery on a university campus. But the second was also that our universities don't have public engagement budgets. Which university has the budget to take research into the public domain by bringing artists and scholars together and creating exhibitions 3 times a year, 4 times a year? So so we have in many ways this kind of highly siloed, not just research but siloed education itself, where in India, and the other added sort of layer to it is that of hierarchy, right? Like, so if you are, you will know this, if you're smart, you're in IIT or you're in IIC, if you're not so smart, you're studying arts in some random college in, whatever, Bombay or Delhi, right? Which is what I was. So there is not only siloing of education, but there's also a hierarchy. So which means that a young 17, 18-year-old history student has never had a fight with a 17 and 18-year-old IITian unless they socially otherwise find themselves, in each other's company. But in the classroom, they have not fought. In the dorm, they have not fought. In the dining hall, they have not fought, or talked to each other, or done some, theater with each other, or something like that. Unless they socially outside meet, in the context of study or in the context of accessing knowledge, they rarely come to interface with each other. This, in fact, is an image of the museum right next to. It's the art college in Calcutta, right next to the Indian Museum. Because these places at some point were seamless, right? Like, and as I often like to say, art at some point was the description of science in a way. Botanical drawings, herbariums, zoological drawings. So art was integral. So your ability to observe was your ability to precisely understand what you were observing, including anatomical drawings, for example. You could draw not because you drew beautifully, but because you understood what was to be drawn. And so those skills were integral to understanding knowledge. And that, of course, that connection is since lost. So is there value then in bringing back this dialogue? And as I call it, as I often say, bringing science back into culture where it firmly belongs. Because all human activity belongs firmly in the domain of culture. And that then is the third problem that we want to address or resolve or solve or make, that sounds a bit much, contribute towards resolving and solving for the future at the gallery. So this is in many ways my North Star constellation. These are the 3 words. Science, and by science, we mean the human, the social, and the natural sciences, not natural sciences alone. It's an Anglo-American inflection to think of science only as natural sciences, because if you go to the German-speaking world or the French-speaking world, when you say science, it means the human, social, and natural sciences. So that's the assumption we have at the gallery. Culture, because art is also just as distant from everyday life, and so culture is a much wider sort of arena. It's more accessible to everyone, and that is sort of the second word then. An experiment, because such an institution is an experiment, but also we have given teeth to the idea of experiment by pioneering something like a public lab complex, which draws from the Raman and Faraday idea. So this is the way in which our space is largely divided. I don't think you can see it properly, or is it just my eyes? Oh, you can't see it properly. So if you see this, our building is divided into 3 parts, not necessarily divided into 3 parts, but 3 broadly equal parts. One is back of house, which is storage and office and whatnot. This is the public engagement complex, which is largely exhibition halls, which is common for us, as in we have it, but also our sister galleries elsewhere have it. This is unique to us in that we have 6 labs, and then these are community spaces, which again, of course, almost every institution has. The 6 labs that we have, I'll come to in a second. So we have now in October, so I have been in position for a little over, more than 6.5 years now. And we started programming in October 2019, just before the pandemic. The building construction also began sometime, I never remember that. It's the kind of trauma you want to forget. Started in about 2019, something like that, and the pandemic slowed it down, etc. The building completed and we opened our doors earlier this year on January 19th. So we've done 6 exhibitions so far. The 7th one has just opened in our building. And these are just broadly some numbers to share with you. We also, as I said, we work with young adults, so we do a lot of mentoring, and we have different kinds of programs, some of which I'm happy to speak about, in the question and answer session. So we do. We've done a summer school. We hope to replicate that going forward. But even otherwise, we train young people on the exhibition floor. We give them training on everything that we exhibit. We also have workshops, master classes, public lectures, tutorial sessions, student learning experiences, exhibition in a box, which Ashank, my colleague here, has brought, who is a senior member of our programs team. We have our exhibition in a box, we have activity handbooks, so range of things to make things accessible. And the one thing that I want to say here is that despite my inability to speak Kannada, everything that we do, everything that we produce in-house is in both languages, English and Kannada. So these are the 6 exhibitions we've done. As you will see from the titles itself, right since the first exhibition, we've been working bilingually. Elements was to mark 150 years of Mendeleev's periodic table. Submerge was about water. Phytopia was about the world of plants. Contagion, of course, was during the pandemic. Psyche was about the mind, and carbon about the element and its place in our life. I'll just share with you some images from our exhibitions. This is from Elements. This is from our exhibition on water. So you'll see the people who you see in black t-shirts usually are our mediators. This is also from the exhibition on water. This is from Elements. This was also a sort of life and non-life experiment during water. This is from our new building, and this is from Carbon. This is our main hall, entry hall. This is also from Carbon. This is also from Carbon. This is again from Carbon. I put images because I tend to speak a lot and I speak fast. So this is also from Carbon. More recent work. This is from the newest exhibition, which is called Sci 560. 560 is 560 are the first 3 numbers of the Bangalore pin code. So the exhibition is about science in the city of Bangalore. This is not quite it, but this is right next to Raman's tabla, which we have displayed. So to mark his research on acoustics as opposed to only optics. This is an extract from a Paul Zill's film about Hindustan Trainer 2, which was made between IISc, HAL, and then used by the Indian Air Force. This is bird song also from the newest exhibition. We borrowed this this is the old projector from Jawaharlal Nehru Planetarium. This is at the launch of Sci 560. And this is N.G. Arun Kumar's statue that we have still not returned to. This is the entryway to Sci 560. This is our building when we have the Lantana elephants. Recently, we've had media coverage, and this is one media coverage. But I think in some ways there are 3 things that my team and I feel good about. Because we are a young institution, we are a new institution. The average age of my team is about 25, 26. Contagion, the exhibition that I just spoke about, was reviewed in the Lancet and favorably reviewed in the Lancet. We also got a prize for it, an international prize for it, and more recently, Carbon was covered in The Economist. And this was not something we commissioned or we asked for. This happened sort of serendipitously, which we feel good about. These are the labs. Now I think you can read, no? Yeah. Okay, so these are the 6 labs: food lab, theory lab. It should be nature lab, not natural sciences lab. My apologies. Materials lab, new media lab, and black box. Happy to speak about these later. Yeah. We have received full funding for 2 of the labs. The labs are not fully open yet because we need to work towards getting them funded. So this is how we work. So 1/3 of our funding comes from the government, and 2/3 we raise on an annual basis. These are our patrons, and I thought it is important to share because what is it that makes an institution even possible? I think not only are we grateful for the support we have, but also I think it's important to mark what it takes to take this work forward because so again we don't charge any tickets. We don't charge any money for any of the workshops, for example. So everything we do is free to the end user. And therefore, it means we need a lot of support from the kind of people who are supporting us, right? Including the government. This is to just showcase that, we partner with relevant institutions, research institutions, but equally cultural institutions. So we work with museums also, but research institutions also. So this gives you a sample of institutions that we have worked from abroad. And this is also the comparable Indian institutions who we also work quite closely with. So the Indian National Science Academy, but also the Indian Academy of Science, for example, have sponsored our lecture series in the past, and we are hoping to continue that partnership going forward. They still support our work. We, again, same thing, we work with museums as well as research institutions. So with that, I will stop. I hope I have not overshot my time, and I'm happy to take questions. Thank you for your attention.
I have a,
Please.
a question, but a sort of a confusion, I should say. Okay, when we talk about history and then use that as a platform to do science, to learn science.
History is not, I wouldn't say history is a platform to do science. History is a platform to know about how science was done.
How science was done.
Yeah.
But isn't there a danger that sometimes that we fall back to the kind of philosophy that is being talked about today, that we were great at the time and we are
No,
those.
I'm a 20th century historian. My inspiration, my time stops for me in the late 19th century.
Okay.
I don't know anything before that, and I'm serious about it, because to know anything before that, I would have to know Sanskrit, I would have to know Prakrit, I would have to know Pali, I would have to know Persian, I would have to know classical Tamil, Kannada, Telugu. I don't know any of these. So,
No, why I'm asking is today we have a discussion on my Facebook page.
Yeah.
Because I posted that somebody said during Vijayanagara time we had plenty of gold because we knew about alchemy. Okay, I said no, alchemy has not given us gold. So
see, these are questions for which someone like me will not have answers, because this is, as I said, my training is in the long 20th century, late 19th to the early 21st century. And I'm not looking at history as an inspiration for, I don't believe history offers lessons. Historians offer insights, right? Like, because you don't step into the same river twice, time doesn't repeat itself, context changes, everything, processes change, people change. So I think stuff has to be, that doesn't mean history is without value. So, baby, bathwater, bathtub, everything can't be thrown out. I think there is the reason why I believe, for example, history of science, but not just history, but history of science is important, is because we often forget what we have done, at what cost, and to what end. So in order to always be aware of where we are, we need to be aware of why we are where we are, right? Like, and what kind of, and any good historian will tell you that it is not a teleological process. Various things were possible and some choices were made. And so what we need to be aware of are the choices that were made. So so for me, it's a very, very, how should I put it? When I do bring history into my discussion or my thinking, I would like to remain very clear about what it is that I'm bringing in and why. It's not a general blanket kind of suggestion that anything and everything from the past can be borrowed without any complication or a problem. Yeah.
questions.
So in the beginning of your talk, you said in the past, institutions were accessible so people could go experiment regardless of their profession and bring it to a
Some
presentable
institutions,
state.
Yes.
Now, does your institution provide that facility?
So when the labs will be open, yes. Yes. That is the goal.
Have there been any examples of moving from that space to formal institution?
Historically, yes.
No, in your institution.
We are 9 months old, yeah.
Okay.
In human life, we haven't even learned to walk yet. So it's going to take time. And the labs are still open, it will take time.
So what's the focus of your food lab?
There is going to be no focus, right? Like, so people will come.
You got to provide some basic infrastructure.
No, you don't. Infrastructure, yes.
So what kind of infrastructure? That determines the focus.
I understand what you mean by that, but I think so here's the thing: if the lab complex will run on the same principles as our engagement complex, so if the labs were live when carbon was live, for example, as an exhibition, then across the labs there'll be scholars and artists who'll be working on carbon or with carbon. So that's the motivation, and so there'll be basic equipment, but equipment will be renewed, will be revised, will be borrowed, will be rented. So it's stuff that we're working on. Yeah. But focus will take away from
Why food?
huh?
Why food?
Why food? I mean, in India, of course, we live to eat and get married, as I like to say. But I think food is very important, right? Like, I mean, it is what drives us. It is an important question. Otherwise, in terms of food security, also access to food is also a question. But I mean, I think we're trying to find ideas that anchor a range of practices, right? Like, so if you talk about a food lab, or a range of things from, say, the chemistry of molecular gastronomy to agriculture can be brought in, right? Like, and of course, we've decided on 6 using some sort of rationale. It's not an absolute rationale in a sense, right? There could be 12 labs, or there could be just 3, right? Like, and a range of other things could come. But I think food is, apart from being important, also an attractive idea, and one where one could actually assemble people to think about more pressing questions and problems.
There are 2 interesting institutions in Mysore.
Yeah, CFTRI, we visited,
And
yes.
there's also DFRI.
The?
DFRI, the Defense Force.
Yes.
Which supplies
Space.
food to people who go into space.
Yeah.
For example.
Yeah.
So you interact with them?
We visited CFTRI, yes. Spent some time there. The DFRL not, but we just had our open call for an exhibition on called Calorie, which is, of course, which apart from the idea of measurement has food fairly central to it. So we will be working with them. Yes.
Among the visitors,
Yeah.
how many this government high school children have come? Do you have any idea?
Ashant, do you have some sense of?
We don't have specific data on government high school students, but on students itself, half of our last exhibition has been another.
So we do get government school students.
How do they get to know?
Huh?
How do they get to know that this?
We send out information, the government sends out information, K-Steps sends out information. So Karnataka Science and Tech Promotion Society, through which our grant is routed to provide information. We work with Agastya Foundation, we develop some modules for them, so through them we read some government schools, etc. Do you know better ways to reach them?
So because from the ideas you have conceptualized, it looks like those children who are in those underprivileged or resourceless,
Yeah.
they might have a lot of ideas, but they never get the opportunity
Yeah.
to come, visit, ask questions.
Yeah.
So I was wondering whether the surrounding areas where you are located,
Yeah.
are the schools aware of this? Do they know?
So we work, we spread the word as much as we can. But again, in 9 months, there's only that much you can accomplish. But yes, we've also worked with one agency, one organization that I've forgotten the Azim Premji Fields Institute teams. And so they then, for example, so my team has held workshops for teachers who work in government schools to take the exhibition in a box, the activity handbooks into those schools, for example. So the thing is, one of the, we also have open courseware, which is also in Kannada, online, etc. We will not be able to do everything. And that's an awareness I have, and I think one should state that upfront. One institution can't do everything, but I think what we can do is work with institutions who already work with government schools, science centers, schools across Karnataka, public libraries in Karnataka, and we work with them such that we create the material, then they can then take it further. Because, if you try to dilute what you're, at the end of the day, we have that much of a team. If we try to do everything, I think we'll fail quite miserably. So. But the goal is there. I mean, and that's also the reason why both English and Kannada, that's also the reason why no entry fees whatsoever, reduce as much as possible barriers to entry.
In your institution,
Yeah.
how do you collaborate with the science, with the arts? Have you experimented anything? Arts, any form of arts?
So we, all our exhibitions so far, I think the current one is probably the least in that sense a collaborative exhibition, but all of them are collaborations between artists and scientists. All of them, every single one of them.
Any specific examples? Can you give elaborate?
So I can give you one example of collaboration that we induced, not inside the institution, but outside the institution last year, where we brought a marine biologist to work together with two artists. And at the end of a few months, they produced a room as a result of their conversation. One was a mural of a coral reef, which was, and the artist used all kinds of material from ceramic to textiles to whatever to create a visual representation of what a coral reef looks like. And it was fairly sort of visually stunning, quite arresting, etc. It was scientifically not accurate, but it was very, very beautiful. And the other person, what they did was they listened to several hundred hours of underwater recordings that were done by the marine biologist. And in that conversation, actually, so this is the wonderful thing that happened. They were able to identify that this person had ended up recording the arrival of grouper fish during the mating season in the coral reefs, which he knew happens, but he did not know he had actually captured that sound. So because of working with this artist, they were able to identify that this is the sound of isolate that sound from the regular recordings in the coral reef, and then they made a sound installation out of it. But the fun thing was, and this is what. In a way, this is also why it is meant for young adults and older people and not for school children, because the explanation there is not that this is the sound of grouper fish, but the explanation was the artist then kind of made it almost into a science fiction kind of thing where the sound it was there and then the marine biologist table was recreated there and whatnot. So unless you have someone there explaining what's happening, it is not easy to access. So that's why we for example have mediators on the exhibition floor. So we have 12 full-time and about 25 part-time mediators who we train for several hours. The last batch we trained for in 1 year about 300 hours. And the current batch has also undergone at least, I think, 100 hours of training by now. And then they mediate on the exhibition floor. So, yeah, that would be one such example.
Is your focus to spread this to other institutions so that a single place is very limited, right?
Correct.
So it needs to be spread to the various institutions and universities so
Yeah.
that they provide what you are trying to provide.
Yeah, so it's a hard battle. I mean, you know that from your own work here, it's not very easy to do. So I'll tell you that my approach to what Electronic City calls scaling up, which I think is a bad idea. Not everything, so there's a lovely thing that I heard recently where, what works at scale is not necessarily the same thing as scaling up. Because what we do works because we talk to people individually and we have workshops individually and we don't have more than 25 students in a tutorial or 25 students in a master class or workshop and things like that. That can't be scaled up easily. It's not possible to deliver the same experience or the same kind of exchange of knowledge by scaling up. But replication is a good way to scale up.
Yes.
And so what we want to do is develop methods, and that's why then the exhibition in a box, the activity handbook, the open courseware that we have online, both, and all of these are in Kannada as well as English. So to develop these things and going forward, then also develop a methods toolbook for how to do this. And hopefully, slowly it starts becoming attractive enough. And because we are doing our best to make sure we have the funds so that we can always offer it for free to everyone who wants to have access to it. Hopefully that will then allow for more room to be created. I mean, everyone in this room knows what the attitude is generally in institutions of engineering and science, right? Anything that is peripheral, that is seen to be peripheral, I don't think it's peripheral, but anything that is seen to be peripheral, to the consumption and regurgitation of what is to my mind in a limited way considered science and engineering is we just ignore it. Right? Like we think we basically think people who can't do science and engineering do history, people who can't do science and engineering do art, and I think highly impoverished and shrunken imagination that we work with. So to crack this across a population of the size that we have is not happening in my lifetime. But at the same time, I don't think we have the luxury of not doing anything about it. So I think methods is the best way to do it. Replication is the best way to do it. Once we start having better funding to get all of this, right now we're doing Kannada. At some point, we should start doing other Southern Indian languages, do Hindi, because once you do Hindi, you get Maharashtra as well, considerable parts of Maharashtra as well, and Southern Indian languages. And then hopefully, I don't know, in 50 years, maybe some 1 millimeter of movement. I don't know.
So could you flash those other focuses again, the 6 focuses that you had?
The labs?
Yeah.
It's not a focus, please
Yeah,
don't call it a
okay,
focus.
whatever.
Yeah, the labs.
Appropriately.
We call it experimental spaces, for lack of a better word.
So what's the theory?
So here's the thing, right?
Can you
Like,
expand on each of those 6? They look interesting.
I can say a couple of sentences about
Yeah,
each.
yes.
I wouldn't want to expand too much because this is not about what my idea is, right? Like I think people should come and expand on these, transform these, and if something is redundant, then actually suggest a new idea as well. The main idea is definitely I can extrapolate significantly on the main idea, which is that we need experimental spaces in the public domain where someone can take an idea to a reasonable degree of completion, such that it can be taken somewhere else. That I'm clear on, and that I can speak about a lot. But these things. So theory lab is one where the hope is that we bring people who don't necessarily need experimental apparatuses, but can actually, or either don't need them or don't yet know that they need them. Right? Like so, this is a bunch of people who just want to explore collaboration and want to talk to each other. They could be from fields that don't need instruments, but they could be also from fields that eventually might need equipment. So this is so the theory lab is more of an exploratory space where we bring, again, thematically we bring people together. So it's not like it's totally random. Then nature lab. This is in fact actually quite, again, one can actually hark back to the Hunterian lab, for example, of the late 19th century, where biology, physics, chemistry was still not quite disciplines, right? Like there was natural philosophy basically. And for me, the basic thinking behind it is as follows, which is that we have looked at nature in a particular way, or we have come to look at nature in a particular way in the last 400 odd years across the world. And the dominant way to look at it, right? Like and dominant in the sense that way of looking at nature, which has teeth, in a sense, which has both resources behind it and the power behind it, or the power that ensues from it. So we have looked at it that way, and we are at the doorstep of not at the doorstep. We are drowning in climate change, right? And we have serious concerns about how we have configured our relationship to nature. So if now this relationship has to be transformed and other ideas have to be built around it, what are those ideas? What are the new good questions to ask? What is the new kind of knowledge you need? Now, someone might just come and say, yeah, we have enough knowledge and we know whatever, we just need to change this and that. I don't think it's that simple. I think philosophers will tell you that there's something deeper that needs to be transformed about how we even imagine or reimagine our relationship to nature. So this would be then the kind of place where such questions or such experiments could be explored. So I'm imagining, for example, that when we select the fellows, they will come from the humanities, they'll come from the social sciences, they'll come from art, from engineering, design, basically from anywhere, right? It doesn't matter. Then for the materials lab, this is not a new idea at all. There are others across the world who are exploring this, which is about materials of the future, living materials, sustainable materials, those kind of things, right? Like how do you work towards that? New media lab, because there's nothing today imaginable without computing, computers, digital, electronic, etc. Right? Like so again, same thing. How do you reconfigure that? My favorite sort of really bad television series is called Lex, Lexx. It is produced by a bunch of Germans and Canadians, where they are traveling across the universe or the cosmos, whatever you want to call it, in a living ship. So this ship is alive. It's an organism inside which they are, and it's so I mean that's science fiction for today, but it's the idea is that something needs to change around us in terms of how we relate and imagine. The last thing is the black box. We are now reconsidering it. I don't know how exactly it can be. That's the one thing that remains to be constructed. Yet we have about 25,000 square feet to construct yet. The idea is to rig this space for any kind of sound, light, data, lasers, so that you can, if you want, study kinetics in this space, or you can also use this as a deep space experience place for augmented reality, virtual reality, expressions which are created in-house. So it's not a thing where you bring one, like recently I think in Bangalore, at least they brought an experience where a painting by Van Gogh was animated in an entire. It's an immersive experience of it. That's not what I mean by that, right? Like, so it's not about experiencing something like that, but actually an experience that's created by us in the lab. Then that is mobilized towards this. So to just give you an example, recently, and I'm not saying we'll do exactly that, and I'm hoping that we'll continue the experiments and new experiences will come out of it. NASA has created one such immersive experience at the American Museum of Natural History, which is satellite imagery and live satellite data and observations about the weather, etc. So all transformations across the globe are captured in this massive room, right? Like, so you go in there and the immensity of that experience just hits you solidly as to what's happening around you, right? Like, and every action, and I think it brings a certain. So I'm hinting at it as an example. I'm not saying we'll create the same thing. So, and again, it will change because it will depend on what kind of capacity we create in the new media lab. We want to collaborate with labs that help create capacity for young people who want to do this kind of work. So I can easily imagine. I would like all the labs to work in collaboration with each other. Of course, I can't make it mandatory. But it will be a strong suggestion. So I can easily imagine, for example, the new media lab and the lab box being, there being projects in collaboration, or the food lab and the nature lab having projects in collaboration, or the nature lab and materials lab having projects in collaboration, etc. So the idea is to suggest collaboration and conversation across disciplines to the largest extent possible.
What is the engagement with centrally funded other research institutes like ISRO or CSIR?
So right now there's no need to do that, right? Like I think right now we have IISc, we have NCBS, we have very close ties to individuals in both institutions, and NCBS, of course, we sat on their campus when our meeting was being constructed. But like I showed you the images, when we do public engagement or lab work in a particular area, we'll reach out to that particular lab, right? Like, so I'm absolutely hoping that for Calgary, we'll reach out to CFTRI and do some work with them. So it will be driven by theme, and we change themes every year. So our sibling galleries change exhibitions every 3 to 4 months. I think it's too expensive to change it every 3 to 4 months, because no matter how frugally you produce an exhibition, it still takes significant amount of research, resources, and material. So it's expensive. And in a city of like 11 to 13 million, depending on I don't know who counts and when, we're not even going to be able to reach people in 3 months to take it down and again do a new thing. So which is why I think we would like to do like year-long exhibitions with a significant public engagement. So every weekend, like right now, there's a program happening there at our gallery. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we have the workshops, masterclasses, public. So every weekend is live with programs. We also have a film festival and a food festival that we do with the exhibition. Again, tied to the topic. So carbon, now Bangalore, and I was going to say something else. I completely forgot. About programming. Oh, never mind. It's, yeah, so, um, yeah. So we bring in, so I mean, just to give you a sense of the Bangalore exhibition, every weekend is adopted by a different institution. So this weekend it's Indian Institute of Human Settlements. Last weekend it was, you should know, you're the programs head. Well, the first weekend was National Center for Biological Sciences. At some point, it was Indian Institute of Science and Harvard Research Institute, so on. You know the list of institutions. So during this year, every weekend, a new institution will do program. So the simple point I'm trying to make is that where relevant, we bring in institutions.
One last.
Please.
So these the talks or interactions that you are having in Bangalore, can they be also brought to Mysore or other places where we can do that? So that way maybe we can scale up also sometime, reaching out more.
Yeah.
I know that you have an online presence.
We
but-
do have. We do have. We have a
do
YouTube
have.
channel. We
Yeah, I know.
have lectures, and all our lectures, for example, are recorded and put up online.
And
So
so
there are-
can we have those kind of lectures also organized here?
Oh, you mean organize it here?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So the one thing that comes to my mind is when you organize a lecture there,
yeah,
so maybe a day or before or a day after,
Yeah.
we can also look up at a space like in Mysore or elsewhere and
Yeah.
organize that. So that way the scaling up will also be.
yeah. No, I mean, I see the value of what you're saying. Resources is, you know, I mean, my programs team is, how many people are you now?
Four.
Yeah, there are 4 people. And the other thing we do is I mean, you know, to bring someone here, all of that will, so the resources we'll have to generate the resources to be able to do that. Online, it's all free, it's all available, YouTube channel is there, online open courseware is there. All of that is very, very easily shared. That's not a problem. It's just, see, trying to get someone to come, right? Like, is a.
That's the major problem for us.
I hear you, because see,
Exactly.
for us to first bring them to the gallery and then to say also do this, it's a. I'm not saying we won't try. Would love to, but I just don't want to say something and then find that I can't
No
deliver on
commitment,
it.
so but we should be trying sometime.
Yeah. No, I think so. Here's the thing, right? Like with the new case steps, whatever it's called, advisory task force, whatever it is, there is a push from the government to take resources from Bangalore into all the science centers across the state. And we are probably, I think, I mean, apart from JN Planetarium, the only institution that is creating original content in Kannada. So we should be able to at least create tracks for that, and within that, if we can. So I'll call you to the meeting. Now you present it. If the government says yes, we'll do it. Sure.
Thank you.
If the government puts money behind it, that's the only thing. I mean, yeah.
Exactly. See, what's happening is for science and this kind of
Yeah,
program.
yeah.
So what we are looking at is sometimes we also feel very embarrassed because we organize here, but getting resource persons from other places is
Yeah.
always difficult.
I agree.
That's the one. So if you get that right connected, the local things can be organized easily.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think, see, it's not impossible. It's just that both you and I know, once we have an idea, it takes a lot before the idea gets realized. So let's work on it. And if it is possible, all I can say is that I would be more than happy to do it, because as you can imagine, we put in a lot. You've seen the gallery, you've seen the content we produce. Some of the content is here, you can see it also. We put a lot of effort, and my team works really, really hard. So for us to have it reach everywhere, I mean, the entire motivation to do it in Kannada was so that we could take it across the state. So if we're able to do it, I mean, we'd be more than happy. It's just that right now I don't have both the manpower and the resources to do it. But I would be happy to work with you to create the resources to do it. That much I can say. Thank you. And my apologies again. I'm hoping at some point I come back and I will at least say 5 sentences in Kannada. Ashanto speaks Kannada, so you can talk as well.
audience. Anybody from audience, please? So, on behalf of Udvari and Kalasuruchi and all this, I know that it's tough to travel from Bangalore.
It's
and
not.
And then again going back to this.
No, it's not tough at all. I slept most of the day.
Monday.